Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more crazy HOA Karen stories. In this video, a homeowner association Karen completely freaked out when I refused to let her access my farm property. Let's dive right into the story. Look, I can take a lot of abuse from an HOA, but one that I'm not even a part of trying to make me change my ways is not a good look on either of us. I would like to think of this as a cautionary tale to the members of the farming community that raise animals for meat. You already know not everyone is gonna support your lifestyle, so be even more aware of those in and around your community that are outspoken against you. So I've owned my farm for close to 15 years. It was originally land that my grandfather owned that he had made into farmland for various crops as well as animals. My father inherited it back in the 1960s and passed it on to me when I was old enough. I like being a farmer. It is rewarding, bringing something up from a sprout to a full plant. Even with the animals that my farm had, there was satisfaction in watching a pig or a calf grow up and thrive in their environment. Even if it ended in their death because of a need for food or another product, I still felt a sense of pride that I'd been able to assist with that growth. One thing that my grandfather and my father made sure of when they owned the farm was that regardless of what their requested use was for, every part of the animal was used in some way. The practice was born out of what my grandpa had seen from his father. Mind you, this is something I've learned from generations of farmers, not just my own family. My grandpa had made sure to cement his vision into my father, and my father made sure I understood the responsibility that I had to the creatures that I tended. It wasn't just about how well I treated them in life, but also how they were treated in death. Nothing was wasted, nothing was thrown away if it didn't need to be. My father all but hammered the facts into me and showed me what to do with all the various parts of an animal in order to make sure they were properly utilized. I would make sure that the bones were used to create soup stock that I'd share with my neighbors, the hide was given to a local tanner, and the innards were used partly for my own meals as well as mixed into the meals for my chickens and pigs. If there was something I had to throw away, it was because it wasn't healthy to give to other animals or to eat myself, and even then I would try to find ways to repurpose it for use somewhere else. Anyway, I thought I would explain myself before getting into the story that brought me here. I just wanted you to know my point of view in all of the nonsense that you're about to hear. So, with the farm, I figured there was going to be some sort of development bordering my land regardless of how far out into the country I am. I made sure to set up property lines so that if there was a community or neighborhood that bordered my farm, it would be clearly marked. Without fail, I was informed about 3 years ago that a neighborhood run by an HOA would be taking up space to the east of my farm. I did not expect the members of the HOA to be so aggressive though. As soon as everything was settled, I received a letter in my mailbox about making sure that my property didn't waft over the scent of dung, since it would create a horrible environment for the people living in the community. Also, they mentioned that any of the pets that I kept on my farm were to stay outside of the community. I won't lie, I tore that letter up immediately. What my farm smelled like was outside of my control, and the fact that a neighborhood was so worried about the smell made me wonder if they should have built their community maybe somewhere else. In regards to the pets, I figured that the HOA was targeting my dog, Rusty. He was a former sheep herding dog that had been retired. I didn't use him for defense of my animals, but he was still loyal to a fault and made sure that all of the farm residents were safe before heading to rest. I thought that I dodged the HOA, but then I got another letter explaining that I was apparently pushing my agenda onto the greater community. I'll be honest, at the time I had no clue what they were talking about and I just ignored the letter completely. Apparently that was a mistake, as the next day brought a woman to my doorstep. We are calling her Karen unironically. Karen was quick to identify herself as a member of the HOA board, letting me know that it was her community that my farm bordered. I just smiled and nodded, knowing that the sooner I had her leaving my property, the better. She said she just wanted to let me know that she hadn't received a reply to her letter and hoped that I would be getting it and writing back to her soon. I just nodded and watched as she headed to a car that looked like it was out of a magazine. It was just that shiny. I let the matter rest and hoped that since Karen had confronted me, that was all that she needed from me. But apparently, no. One weekend morning, I opened my door to find Karen and a group of other people standing on my porch. I could only stare as she attempted to lecture me on what I was doing with my life and how wrong it was. Karen, young man, you understand that your practice of farming is unethical, don't you? Me, excuse me? Karen, your farm is not in line with the values that I and the members of my HOA wish to provide our community members with. I understand that you need to make a living, but please know that your treatment of animals on this farm is beyond reprehensible. Me, ma'am, with all due respect, the animals that I raise on this farm are for consumption. They are being used for the meat and meals that you eat on a day-to-day basis. Karen, that's just it, isn't it? I'm vegan, along with the members of my community gathered here with me. Your practices go against our beliefs and our morals, and we are asking you to stop. Me, ma'am, my farm has been here longer than your HOA has been. If you got an issue with my practices, then you need to talk to someone else. I'm not changing anything just because you don't feel comfortable. I thought it was the right thing to say at the time, and I was bolstered with Rusty at my side, growling at the intrusion of strangers on my farm. The group left in a huff, a few giving me harsh looks, but I stood my ground. What more could Karen try to do, right? After all, it was my property she was on, and I had my rights to defend it and keep people off it. Well, another week went by before Karen returned. This time, she brought even more people with her, and they all brought signs. From what I could tell, she was setting up a protest, so I thought I would chat with her before she started anything she would regret. Me, can I help you? Karen, left your slaughterhouse, have you? We are not gonna let you proceed with your animal cruelty while we are able to stop it. Me, ma'am, if you want to learn the story of this farm and how we treat our animals, your best bet is to just ask and not stage a protest. Karen, but if we don't protest, then your farmer friends will think that this is the way things are supposed to go. It's our responsibility to show you that this is animal cruelty in its most reprehensible form. Now, I don't think I told you about how my farm is set up, but the land that Karen and her gang were on was mine. There was a fence that separated my farming area from my front lawn, Karen and her group all touting signs about animal abuse and horribly disfigured animals that waved around the still air. It felt wrong and I knew I needed to nip this in the bud. So I headed to my barn, Rusty following behind me, and I grabbed a shotgun to hopefully scare Karen and her group off. When I got out of the barn, Karen and her group were at the edge of the fence and they seemed more than a little surprised that I'd brought out a gun. Karen immediately went to her pocket and grabbed her phone, dialing a number and letting out anguished cries that even made the member of her group flinch. I could already tell that the police were on their way. Once she got off the phone, she started snapping photos of me with my gun and a smug look on her face. I did not move until I saw the police cars pull up to my fence line. To my surprise, the first person to emerge from one of the cruisers was the sheriff. He and I were friendly enough, and he had known my family for years at that point. I could see him looking around, checking Karen and her group, as well as making eye contact with me. He moved towards the fence, leaning against it and motioning for me to come forward. That upset Karen quite a bit. Karen, don't engage with him. Are you insane? He might shoot you. Sheriff, I beg your pardon, ma'am, but I've known that man since he was in diapers. He won't hurt me unless I give him reason to. Karen, but he has a gun. How is it that you would consider that safe enough to move closer to him and have him move closer to you? Sheriff, but he hasn't used it yet. And as far as I know, he has a license to own one and also has the right to defend his land from trespassers. Karen, but he's done wrong. How am I supposed to let his actions lie? Sheriff, maybe by leaving him be, you might be able to forgive him. Karen was about to protest, but the sheriff had told her that technically she was trespassing and needed to get off of my property, or I would have a reason to shoot her and the rest of her group. They were reluctant to leave, but Rusty squeezed through the fence to chase after anyone lingering in their cars, barking the whole time. The sheriff and I talked after most of the cars left, and he was as dumbfounded as I was that someone had the audacity to try and protest on my property without learning about my farming practices. He told me that he wouldn't file a report, but I encouraged him to, not wanting his own reputation to suffer because of my own. Besides, I'd been in the right grabbing a firearm to defend myself and my land. Karen never set foot on my land after that. If she had an issue with my farm, she took it up with someone in a much higher authority. I received a letter from someone in my local government making sure that I still lived at my current address, as someone had reported that I was taking property that was not my own. I'll be honest, after that, I kept to myself for a few months. Not that I was afraid of retribution, but I didn't want my property to be exposed to other hard-headed bigots that were not ready to accept that there were options beyond violence to settle disagreements. Added, some people were asking me if anything else happened after this encounter with the militant vegan Karen, and thankfully nothing else happened. She seemed to be afraid of a home/farm owner that was willing to actually protect his private property, so yes folks, don't be afraid to take the Second Amendment serious if you need to. And yeah guys, let me know what you would have done in this situation if someone threatened your private property, especially if it is a farm. The next one is titled, Am I the a-hole for getting petty revenge on my inconsiderate inconsiderate neighbor? So I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Minnesota with my wife Charlize. We bought our house 4 years ago, and for the first 2 years everything was perfect. We got a beautiful yard that we've put countless hours into maintaining, a garden full of native plants, carefully tended grass, and even a small koi pond that we installed ourselves. Enter my neighbor Oliver, mid-40s, who moved in next door with his massive Saint Bernard Duchess about 2 years ago. Now, I have nothing against dogs, I grew up with them and I love them, but the problem is not Duchess. It is Oliver's complete disregard for basic courtesy and property boundaries. It started small. Once or twice a week I would find dog waste in our yard. At first I assumed it was from stray dogs or other neighborhood dogs, but then I started noticing a pattern. Every morning around 6:30 a.m., Oliver would let Duchess out onto his unfenced backyard, go back inside to make his coffee, and completely ignore where she wandered. And she always wandered into our yard to do her business. Hey, no worries, I told myself, I will just have a friendly chat with him about it. So one Saturday morning I walked over while he was getting his mail. "Morning, Oliver," I said, trying to keep things casual. "I noticed Duchess has been using our yard as her bathroom. Would you mind keeping an eye on her and cleaning up after her?" He barely looked up from his phone and said, "Yeah, sure, whatever. Dogs will be dogs, you know." But nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. Now it was happening multiple times a day. Our yard began to smell, and Charlize could not work in her garden without doing a thorough inspection first. We had to stop hosting backyard gatherings because it was just embarrassing. I tried everything the right way. I documented the incidents with photos and dates. I sent polite but firm emails. I even offered to split the cost of fencing his yard. Each time Oliver would dismiss my concerns with vague promises or outright ignore me. The breaking point came when my 6-year-old niece Ren visited and stepped in a pile of poo while playing in our yard. She was devastated, her new shoes were ruined, and I had to watch my sister clean dog waste off her crying daughter's feet. I went to our HOA, but Oliver apparently plays golf with the president, so that was useless. I called our city's bylaw enforcement, but they said that they needed video evidence of the actual act. After 18 months of this, I snapped. I know it was childish, but I decided to give Oliver a taste of his own medicine. I spent a week collecting every single pile Duchess left in our yard, wearing gloves and using bags, of course. And then one Friday night, while Oliver was hosting one of his weekly poker games, I carefully arranged all the bags in a semicircle on his front porch and lit them simultaneously on fire using long matches, making sure they were contained in the bags and couldn't spread. I rang his doorbell and retreated to behind my hedge with my phone camera ready. The sight of Oliver and his poker buddies rushing out to deal with multiple flaming bags of his own dog's waste was, let's just say, satisfying to say the least. Their reactions ranged from disgust to uncontrolled laughter, and I caught it all on video. But the best part? One of his friends between fits of laughter said, "Dude, is this about your dog? Because I've been telling you for months to clean up after her." The next morning, Oliver came to my door. His face was red, but instead of the explosion I expected, he actually apologized. It turns out his poker buddies had spent the rest of the evening roasting him about being a terrible neighbor. One of them was even a real estate agent who told him how much his behavior could affect property values. Since then, Duchess hasn't been allowed to roam freely, and I haven't found a single pile in our yard. Oliver even installed a fence last week. Here is where I might be the a-hole though. While my methods were juvenile and probably illegal, lighting things on fire even safely contained is not exactly legal, it worked when nothing else did. My wife thinks it was hilarious and justified, but my mother says I should have kept trying legal channels and that I set a bad example for my niece, who thankfully doesn't even know about this. So Reddit, am I the a-hole here? And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think here. Do you think OP acted as the a-hole, or did he do the right thing? Comment number 1 said, "NTA, you tried every reasonable approach first and your revenge was basically harmless, but made its point perfectly. Sometimes people need to experience the consequences of their actions to understand how they affect others." Comment number 2, NTA. As someone who spent years creating a beautiful yard, I felt this in my soul. Your neighbor was destroying your property daily and didn't care until he faced consequences. The fact that his own friends called him out shows how wrong he was. Comment number 3, you are the a-hole, and I cannot believe I had to scroll this far to find a reasonable response. Everyone here is cheering on what is literally arson. I don't care how contained the fires were, you deliberately set multiple fires on someone's porch. What if one of the bags had tipped over? What if there had been something flammable nearby? What if someone had slipped and fallen while rushing to put them out? Yes, your neighbor was being inconsiderate and breaking bylaws. And yes, you tried proper channels first, but the solution to someone breaking minor bylaws is not to commit a crime that that could have resulted in property damage or even injury. You are lucky your neighbor found it funny and his friends shamed him because he would have been well within his rights to call the police. Being justified in your anger does not justify any action you take in response. And the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. So for the past week, my wife and I had been anticipating a baseball game for which we had purchased tickets. We like baseball, but we don't attend many games, so traveling into the city to see games is a rare treat. I know that it would take time to drive there and find parking due to traffic though. Because the game started at 7 PM and we live about 45 minutes from the stadium, I told her this morning that she needed to be ready to get in the car and go by 6 PM. Well, my wife is an avid gamer, so she was engrossed in her latest video game when the clock struck 5:45 PM. She has struggled to plan in the past, and I get tired of reminding her that she needs to budget time to get ready. It is as if she has no concept of time at all, similar to a young child. Well, I was ready to go by 6 PM and she was in the bathroom. I saw this as an opportunity to teach her personal responsibility, so I simply left the house without saying a word, got in the car and started driving to the game. It took my wife a few minutes to figure out what I had done, but when she called me she was absolutely furious. She said that it was a completely unacceptable move for me to leave without telling her and that she now had no way to get to the game without paying for parking. I told her that I got tired of constantly waiting for her and that she should plan better next time if she didn't want to get left behind. I also reminded her that I had told her that morning when I expected her to be ready to leave. Absolutely none of this seemed to matter though, and she rudely hung up on me after yelling out more insults. Frankly, I think it's completely insane that a grown woman is unable to budget her time, and I'm starting to suspect that she is doing this on purpose because she is a narcissist who expects me to accommodate her. After all, she's not a stupid woman, she has a science degree. And well, she never showed up to the stadium and I didn't hear from her the whole game, but when I got home there was a note on the door. She told me that I was not welcome in the bedroom and that I should sleep on the couch. I cannot believe she wants to be this much of a pill. And by the way, Ripe Stars, I've never heard that expression before. What does it mean to be a pill? Not sure. Anyway, if I'd waited for her, I would have missed the first pitch. I made my expectations clear and she couldn't be bothered to meet them. I feel like she should be the one apologizing to me. Am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Is OP the a-hole or not? A first comment on Reddit said, "You are the a-hole. You waited until she was in the bathroom and could not see you to leave to teach her a lesson while she was actively getting ready and nearly done by your timeline of just a couple minutes to notice you were gone. You are infantilizing her and she was literally just a couple minutes behind you. She is not the pill here. You are a whole entire chore." Comment number 2, everyone sucks here. You should have at least said you were leaving. You are, however, insane, want a divorce or have a death wish. And yeah guys, before we end the video, we will read the final story from r/petty revenge that is super satisfying. It is titled, "The Drunk A-Hole That Got Served." So way back in the late 80s, my husband and I drove from Omaha to Kansas City to see The Who at Arrowhead. I was about 8 months pregnant and this was our last getaway before kid number 2 came around to keep us tethered for a while. When we got to our minivan, I know, after the show, there were about 6 to 8 college-age kids in the vacant spot next to ours. They were drinking beers and having a good time. They were also throwing their empty beer cans everywhere besides a trash can. Everywhere mostly seemed to be behind and on both sides of our car. This was not a big deal, but we had to back out and didn't want to have to run over about a dozen beer cans. As we were getting into the van, one of us said to them, "Hey, would you mind just moving the cans behind us so we can back out and go?" Out of nowhere, one of the guys in the group went to crazy town. His chest got all puffy and he started yelling at us like, "Who do you think you are telling us what to do?" Now years later, I don't remember what he said. I just remember we looked at each other with, "What the F is going on here?" My husband said, "Look, we just want to leave, so move the beer cans from under and behind our car." Crazy Town moved into a whole other realm of ballistic. He started slamming his palm against a van window hard, demanding that we make him move those cans. To this day, I'm still amazed at the resilience of those Chrysler windows. His nuttiness provoked both of us, and we were both out of the van yelling at him to get away from our van. When it looked like a fight might break out between my husband and CT, I stepped in between. I didn't figure anyone was gonna hit an 8-month pregnant woman. Well, at this point, his buddies kind of pulled him back, but he was still mouthing off. We snaked our way forward between a couple of other cars and drove off with them, throwing fists and yelling. A few rows over, we noticed a couple police cars. We looked at each other and said, "Yep, We drove over and recounted what had happened. The officer saw my belly and told us to take him to them, so we drove back over. Crazy Town saw us and immediately jumped towards our van, clearly ready to resume his tirade. We pulled over into a parking spot, and that is when he saw the police car. The first thing the cop said was, "You boys having some fun here tonight?" We hear a round of "yes sir" from the group. Then the cop asked, "Are you old enough to be drinking? Let's see some IDs." The group got quiet, real quiet. The cop says, "I didn't think so. So the first thing you're gonna do is pour out every can that's here, open or unopened, and when that is done, we're gonna talk about your disturbing the peace charges." We watched as the cop pulled a full case of beer from the trunk, and the kids started pouring out beer from the open case and the new case, and then we looked over at Crazy Town, waved out the window and said with huge grins, "Have a good night. Bye." Still laughing, 36 years later, still laughing. And yeah guys, thank you so much for watching. I will see you again tomorrow. Please also check out my playlist by the way.